Welcome to the Experience Darden podcast. I'm your host, Brett Twitty, and you are listening to a new episode. This episode of the podcast resumes something of an annual tradition here on the Experience Darden podcast. Every year when we have new consortium liaisons named, we invite them on the show to talk a little bit more about their story and what attracted them to their role. To this end, recently caught up with 3 first-year students in our full-time MBA class of 2023, Alexis Orr, Minnie Lahoti, and Angel Monrroy. They are the newly named Consortium Liaisons here at the Darden School of Business. And I connected with them, well, to talk about their MBA journeys and what they're excited about in the year ahead as they plan for and contemplate their role as Consortium Liaisons. If you're interested in learning more about the Consortium, what this community is all about here at the Darden School of Business, the benefits of Consortium mentorship for MBA students, the list goes on. Any of that sounds of interest to you, this episode is essential listening. So without further ado, here is my interview with Consortium Liaisons, newly named, here at the Darden School of Business, 3 first-year students in our full-time MBA class of 2023, Alexis Orr, Minnie Lahoti, and Angel Monrroy. Alexis, Minnie, Angel, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you, Brett.
Thank you.
Well, it's great to have y'all here. You wouldn't believe it today when we were recording this. It's like 40 degrees outside, but y'all are like post spring break, which in my mind suggests that like the weather should be getting warmer. I hope that will happen soon. Alexis, how are you doing? You're in electives now. Maybe have a little bit more time back in your schedule. Maybe found a daily way to kind of fill your time in your days now that you're post-core. What are you up to?
Yeah, that's every time someone asks me if I have more free time, the answer is absolutely not, because I just find ways to fill it. And so I schedule my life as though I'm going to have free time and plan all these wonderful things to do with it. And then somehow my calendar is booked 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. So, but no, it's really good. And it feels like a good things that my calendar is filled with, things I'm wanting to do more so and looking forward to. One of those things that we just did was the basketball tournament this weekend for Darden Cup. I am overly competitive, and so I walked away with a hurt knee, and I'm on crutches now, but otherwise everything was great. Our Section E men won, so it was a net positive. Just a good weekend.
Oh man, I am so sorry to hear about your knee.
That's okay.
Okay. Will it keep you from other Darden Cup activities?
Knowing myself, the answer is no, and it probably should, but no. I'll be fine. I have to go to PT for a couple of weeks just to get it back into fighting shape, and then it's just because I have no business playing basketball. That's really the problem. If it was a tennis tournament, we would have been fine. I play tennis. I do not basketball, but I tried. So.
All right. Well, we have talked about Darden Cup a bunch here on the podcast. We had Kate Allen on. She is VP for Darden Cup. And it's one of those things that we try to help prospective students understand just how much fun it is, and 2, how much energy around the school is sort of directed towards Darden Cup and all the activities that happen during the year. And it's been one of the fun things to talk about here on the podcast. So thank you, Alexis. And Minnie, coming to you next. All right, you're in electives now, you're post-spring break. How are things going?
Doing well. I actually just got back from seeing my family after 3 years. So I was in India for spring break. And this week, actually, just like Alexis, I filled my calendar already with a bunch of stuff. The Darden drag show is next week. And so I'm helping with choreography for the kings and the queens, and doing hair and makeup, so busy with that. And I'm also writing some sketches for the Follies Comedy Club that we have at Darden. And so that's been keeping me busy. So it's nice to get away from a little bit of academics and focus more on the creative side of things that I've been missing. So overall, I think I'm doing well.
Have you done anything like either of these activities before, helping with drag show choreography, writing for the Follies? Have you any prior experiences in your life?
I have never done either of those things, and it's been really fun learning. I've done dancing before, but it's cool to be part of the drag show. And then I never thought I was funny, so it's kind of interesting that I'm writing a Folly sketch, but let's see how funny it is when it comes together.
All right. Well, that's exciting. I think one of the things that has really come through for me talking with students on the podcast, particularly when they get post-core and they feel like maybe they have a little bit more time, a little bit more control over their time, is that's where it becomes really about your priorities and passions and like what you want to make of this experience. And that's one of the threads that has really been clear to me as we talk with second year students. And obviously that journey begins towards the end of your first year too. So it's cool to hear how you and Alexis have been spending your time as of late. How about you, Angel? What have you been up to?
So for me, I spent spring break in Cartagena, actually, along with Alexis and a big group of our consortium family. It was a really great time. And then coming back into Q4, when we come back from these breaks, it always takes me a little while to sort of get back into the rhythm of things after being out of it for a little while. So that's kind of the headspace that I'm at right now. And I also feel like this quarter may not be as easygoing as I was hoping it was going to be. I might have to treat it like a Q1 or Q2 because I finished my recruiting early in the first half of the year. And then the way that my recruiting turned out, I'm actually going to a group in the summer that I didn't really do a lot of corresponding with back in the fall. And I've kind of left that for Q4. And then there's some other prep that I would like to do this quarter. And then, of course, there's this liaison role that we've all thrust ourselves into. So just trying to get my head around, what's to come in Q4 and getting myself prepped for the summer as well. So that's where I'm at.
Well, spring break at Darden is longer than other spring breaks that I've seen in higher ed. I come from a law school background. I went to college and law school. I think I was very used to having like a week. It's more than a week, which to your point, Angel, you come back, maybe a little bit of rust, maybe a little bit of like your muscles have atrophied just a touch. Does that sound familiar to you?
Yeah, exactly. Just a teeny tiny bit. I'm the type of person that I get a little bit overwhelmed when I have like a long list of to-dos. And it's not until I sit down and kind of list them all out, maybe get cracking with like, the smaller items on my priority list, if you will, that I really start to, build up that confidence and get back in the rhythm of things and start knocking things out. So yeah, spring break definitely took me out of it a little bit. It was well-deserved and I think we had a great time, but it's time to get back to business, right? So here we are.
All right. Well, thank you all for coming on the podcast. The occasion for our conversation is you are the new Consortium Liaisons, and something of an annual tradition to have the new Consortium Liaisons on the show, talk a little bit more about your background and what attracted you to the role. Before we get to the role part of that conversation, would like to talk a little bit more about you and who you are and what you did before coming to Darden and your MBA journey. So, Minnie, would you mind kicking us off? Tell us a little bit more about what you did before coming to Darden.
Sure. If I had to just say in one sentence who I am, I say that I'm an extroverted engineer who loves to teach organic chemistry and promote D&I efforts. That's like my one-liner. But before Darden, I actually did a bunch of different things. I have a master's in chemical engineering, and I worked in the automotive industry for about 3.5 years. And that was a really cool experience. But I was also the only female engineer in my division, which was kind of challenging. That's when I actually kind of started thinking about, I want to be in more leadership positions where I can make a bigger impact. And, one way to do that is potentially get a MBA. But I wasn't sure what I wanted to do with my MBA. So I thought, like everybody else, maybe consulting is the way to do it. And I actually ended up working for a boutique firm in Houston for about 9 months when COVID happened. And I actually got laid off from my job. So I had to pivot a little bit. And that's when all the data analytics and working in tech became really big for all the flexibility and stuff. And so I decided to take some courses on Python and other data analytics. And at the same time, because I didn't have a job, I was actually tutoring organic chemistry and other STEM subjects. And I started my own business where I started hiring other tutors during the pandemic because there was such a big need for teachers during COVID. So I really leveraged that and wanted to continue growing my business. And so as I was getting closer to applying to Darden, I felt that my entrepreneurial spirits and also wanting to get into tech a little bit was part of the reason why I came to Darden as well. So now here I am trying to grow my tutoring business and figuring out how I'm going to continue it.
So the tutoring business is still going.
It is still going. I still have a couple of tutors that work for me. Yeah.
Wow, that's awesome. And did you ever imagine that you would get into tutoring or that you'd be running a tutoring venture?
I have always taught, actually, even in undergrad. Since I've been teaching these subjects in sophomore year of college, even when I had a full-time job as an engineer, I did it on the side because I love to teach, but I never thought it would be a viable source of income before. So when push came to shove and I didn't have an income, it was, I had to do what I had to do. And it turned out that there's so much demand for it that I could actually grow it into a business. And Damon DeVito, actually, he's one of the adjunct professors. He has been helping me grow my business slowly. And that has been really cool.
Well, if I have to mention one person who was mentioned seemingly all the time here on our admissions podcast, it's Damon DeVito, who is actually going to come on the show with a couple of student founders and talk about how they work together on those students' ideas. So I'm really excited about this episode. We're recording it very soon. Somebody who has been mentioned and mentioned and mentioned. And at some point as a podcast host, you wonder, like, is this the universe speaking to you? Like, maybe I should invite this guy on the podcast. And he was gracious enough and we found some time. And so I'm really excited about this conversation. So thank you, Minnie. Angel, how about you? Tell us a little bit more about your background. What did you do before coming to Darden?
Absolutely. So before coming to Darden, I was specializing in compensation. So I sort of bounced around a couple of companies on their broad-based compensation teams. And it wasn't until I was working for Red Lobster. They had been acquired a couple of years prior to my arriving at Red Lobster. And so I was seeing sort of this transformation that the company was going through in sort of the midst of what was happening as this private equity firm, was trying to turn the company around. And ultimately they ended up, selling them a few years later. And so as I started to sort of learn more about what was going on at the company, it kind of got the gears turning in my head. I had never really thought about private equity or anything like adjacent, such as venture capital or investment banking. And so as I started sort of getting interested and curious about that, that's what got me thinking about going back to school and pursuing an MBA once I realized that, that could be a potential path to get into, a space like investment banking, private equity, et cetera. So after a couple of years, sort of biding my time, waiting for the right moment, having enough experience under my belt, obviously prepping for the GMAT, I came to Darden because number one, it was my dream school from the start. I was raised in Orlando, went to school in Orlando. I've just loved, being raised in the South, spending time in the South, and Darden, in my opinion, being the premier school in the South. It was, again, my dream school from the jump. And so I think for me, it was a perfect match when I got that acceptance, when I got the call. I remember just like screaming at the top of my lungs. I had to put the phone on mute, of course, but yeah, so that's why I'm here. And that was one of the big drivers, of course, on top of, some of the conversations that I had with students and alum. So
those offer calls are invariably one of the highlights of the job, working in admissions, where you get to call people and share that good news. And occasionally we get folks who cry and scream and all this emoting, which is tremendous as a caller. Like, it is, you already feel like you're sharing some good news, but you really particularly feel like people have put their heart and soul into these applications, right? It's a part of a dream. It's a process to this point. And it is humbling to be along for this journey. And it's particularly humbling to make that call to a person and have them, realize like maybe their dream school or just the idea of being able to pursue an MBA is now a reality. So thank you, Angel, for sharing your story. And Alexis, how about you? What'd you do before coming to Darden?
Yeah. So, it's funny. I knew their stories before this, but it's so interesting to hear them like in a different setting because it feels like I'm learning more. But I am born and raised in Chicago, and for undergrad, I went to Howard University. For anybody that's listening that knows anything about Howard, I'm going to say HU, and I really hope you say on the other side. But so I went to Howard for undergrad. I was a finance major, and then after undergrad, I went to work for Target. So I was on the executive leadership team. And so I did a lot of people management, operations, solutions kind of things, implementations. at Target, loved retail, was really kind of enamored by the space, and then got promoted and moved back to Chicago. And I remember wanting to, and I always knew I wanted to go back to business school. I just didn't know like when. I had a plan that it was like, get some years of experience under your belt and then go back to school was always my trajectory in my head. And I remember going to, there's like an MBA tour that they do, and they had a bunch of schools in Chicago. And I went kind of like a job forum, if you will, and you go to the booths and you talk to schools. And I remember seeing Darden there, and I was like super, super excited. But I had like severe imposter syndrome because I was coming from Target, and there's so many people that were coming from insert here consulting firms or banking, and they were already in those positions that I was kind of hoping to pivot into after business school. And so I had a moment where I was like, maybe I shouldn't do this. Like maybe I'm just not cut out for this. And so I kind of panicked. That was in 2019. And so I was like, I went home and like drew up this whole master plan and was like, okay, we're just going to switch what we do. We're going to get like a new job, and we're going to just like buckle down and study and practice, and then just get ready to feel good about applying to school. And so funny because I ended up transitioning into Equinox, luxury fitness brand, loved doing sales and marketing for them. Such a fun time. And I thought that was like way more impressive. And every interview I've had since recruiting, since getting into business school, has been about my Target experience. So just goes to show that like imposter syndrome is really like a mental game that I was playing with myself, because everyone in admissions, everyone along the recruiting process has been so enamored by what I did at Target. And we're like, yeah, Equinox is great too, but like Target, let's talk about that. Mostly because I think they want to know how to get discounts, but other stuff too. So I ended up getting into Darden, similar to Angel, had a whole like meltdown when I got my phone call. I did not mute it though. I was shameless in my crying on the phone. I was like in the car with my mom. So it was a mix of like, oh my God, this could be a call saying I didn't get in. And I was really hoping that they just sent me an email if I didn't get in. And so I was like, Mom, be quiet, but also like, don't look at me if I don't get in. Like, I don't want to admit it. So got in, obviously great things in here now. And I am going to be going into consulting this summer. So it worked out very well, but it was quite the journey getting there.
Well, thank you for sharing that, Alexis. The imposter syndrome piece, there works in a couple different ways. One of the things that we talk about here on the podcast from time to time is how oftentimes prospective students will compare themselves to some idealized version of a prospective student who comes from this particular background and has worked X number of years in a particular kind of industry. Whether that person really exists, I don't think they do, but it's in people's minds, it's a real thing. And that is a challenge. And then you're right. When you go to these kind of in-person events or you're around other prospective students and you're hearing what they're doing, there's a tendency to kind of feel like, oh, well, I'm not that. And, that kind of indexing to these other people. And what we so often try to remind people, it's easier to say than it is to do. But if you can do it, I think it's very powerful, is to remember that your uniqueness, your difference, you're going to bring a ton to your application, to the program, because you are different than other folks. And to see that difference as a strength rather than a weakness, I think oftentimes prospective students may see it as a weakness. And that's hard, I recognize. But any reactions, any thoughts to that?
Yeah, it's just funny because if you had asked a 5-year-old Alexis to be on this podcast, I would have told you that I was going to med school. And so I don't know if anybody cares anything about astrology, but I'm a Virgo and I'm very much so fit that bill. I live by a list. I'm very type A. And so I didn't think I would ever change my mind. But then I went to college and I was like, you know what? I just want my med school application to look different. So I'm going to go get a finance degree. And then I fell in love with business and I was like, oh crap, I'm changing my mind. And I wish I had remembered that differential factor when it came to applying to business school. Because I think to your point, there's traditionally so many of us think business school is get out of undergrad, go do Wall Street or banking or something for a couple of years, go back to business school. Or, depending on who you are, maybe you don't want to, but go back to business school, get the degree, and then go back into management. And I think I just thought that was a way to go. And I forgot for that year of my life that it's so people were so intrigued by how different that path was. And that was going to add to the classroom. And it's true. It shows up in the case method all the time, how different our collective class is and our different experiences. Like we have a classmate who ran a winery, and I'm like, I'm positive if I was that person, I never would have thought like business school. Yeah, for sure. Like what value do I have in the classroom? But like, I've learned a lot from that person. So it's really interesting hearing like just getting that affirmation again. I just wish I knew that at the time, but hindsight's 2020. So here we are.
That's all right. Well, we're sharing it here on the podcast. Maybe somebody who's listening, kind of thinking about these things, thinking about the application. And we do, as an admissions committee, really try to build for the classroom experience, right? So we are engaged in, we always talk about there's an imaginative aspect to the admissions evaluation process, where when we're reading someone's application or we're interviewing a person, we are trying to project forward into their Darden experience. Think about who they will be in the classroom, outside the classroom, what kind of teammate and classmate they're going to be, how they're going to show up for other people, and what they're going to contribute to those conversations. So a big part of what's on our mind and why that difference, to your point, is so important. Well, thank you all for sharing more about your backgrounds. Angel, I'd like to come to you to kind of kick us off on this next question. Something we talk about here on the podcast is the adjustment to business school, to graduate business school, Darden specifically. People come, they're in the first year, they're balancing a lot, going through the core curriculum, move to a new place, all of these kinds of things. What were the learning curves for you, and how did you work through those?
I think that this idea that you hear when you're, an incoming prospective student, if you talk to folks, you hear this idea that you have like three pillars, right? Social. There's a social aspect to business school. There's obviously the academic aspect, and then one of the number one reasons anyone comes to business school is to get a job, right? So there's the career and recruiting aspect. And it's just so true, right? That you sort of index into two at the expense of another sort of thing. And so that very quickly became super apparent, right? It's like one thing to hear it, but then another thing to really live it out. So like those first couple of weeks in business school, like really trying to grind out and like read every case and like do all the work, and like just being like this, solo machine that's like trying to take on everything. And then recruiting events, which was fine for a while, for the first couple of weeks. And then recruiting starts for banking, that track starts like you're 3 or 4 weeks in tops. I don't remember exactly, it was like 3-ish weeks in. And then you've got that recruiting layer added on top, right? And it's early in business school. So you're also like trying to, again, index into like that social aspect and get to know people before, you want to have a good experience, make friends, et cetera, et cetera. And so you're trying to do all the things. And it was nice to have, we haven't really addressed consortium that much just yet, but to be able to have that network, because I was able to sort of use that a little bit as a crutch, right? To sort of be able to stand on that. I already have sort of a network built in for social activities, social events, gatherings, or even as a backup, on the academic side to get some help. Like, hey, these numbers aren't mathing for me, can you kind of help me here? And then even for recruiting, sharing and pooling resources. So yes, definitely a huge learning curve, but I think that with consortium, I felt really good about my Q1, honestly, when I look back on it. Again, I also did early recruiting and thankfully was successful in that. And so that was able to take a little bit of the pressure off of me.
Well, thank you for talking about the consortium. And I know it's an important community. We just had Sakari Brown here on the podcast, and she was talking about all the support, all the connections she's made through the consortium network at Darden. And for consortium members, the recruiting process starts even prior to matriculation, right, with OP?
Yeah, so the orientation programming I think the prep started April 15th. As soon as the deadline happened, we started the OP prep, and it was like a weekly thing where the Consortium Liaisons, along with the admissions, the Career Center, put together a series of webinars for us to prepare us for the OP programming in June. And it was virtual this past year, but it is going to be in person in Colorado this upcoming year. And it was great. I think because of the OP prep, I got to learn so much about the other consortium students. And before I had even gotten to Darden, I already knew so many people, and which actually helped with the transition into the MBA MBA journey because you don't realize how much you lose when you start your MBA. I mean, your life is completely going to change. I didn't have time to talk to my friends back at home. I was barely keeping in touch with my family because I was so involved with everything that was happening at Darden. I mean, you really do hit the ground running, and it's very easy to get really involved with all the things that are going around you and forgetting everything that was your life before Darden. I mean, it took me 7 months now to realize that, you know what, I really need my dancing back in my life because that's how I was keeping sane. Like, I need to bring back the habits that I had before, but core is just very rigorous. And the transition was definitely tough coming to business school for me.
Were there any strategies, Minnie, that helped you? I mean, what Angel shared about, you start off in like the first few weeks, I think one of the hardest things is you're adjusting the case method. It's a new environment. You're meeting a lot of new people. You've got a learning team. You got to figure out how to work together. You're just, in a new place. I mean, there's a lot of newness. And when you read cases, I don't know, it takes a while to figure out the filter, like what's important as you read. And you're learning about things maybe you have no prior exposure to. So there's also different learning curves combined with the fact that, like, oh, well, you got a lot of really smart, talented people. So you're also trying to figure out where you can add value in these conversations. What do you think about when you look back on those first couple months?
I agree. And I just like Angel, I was trying to do it all. It's just not possible. And I think that's the point. You cannot do it all. You have to pick and choose. And as future leaders, there's a lot that's going to be thrown into our faces, and it's up to us to decide what's important and what's not. And that's what Darden is preparing us for. So by throwing us into the deep end, we had to figure out how to swim. And that was figuring out what was the best way to read cases. And the 80-20 rule, 80% of the time needs to be spent as efficiently as possible on 20% of the things that you want to do, is something I had heard from a professor. And that really resonated with me because I, instead of reading the cases front to back, just maybe reading the beginning. Don't do this, prospective students, but that is something that did help me. I didn't read every nitty-gritty detail because you physically just don't have the time. I started prioritizing the cases that interested me, or I started prioritizing the relationships that I was more interested in building with, either the students or the faculty members. You have to learn quickly, and that's part of the skill that you're building being in the MBA program.
One of the things that I think is also true for folks as you come to Darden is I'm not sure the prioritization that Minnie is talking about here, I'm not sure people have had to do that at another point in their life. Like, this is the first time, I think, for almost everyone in the MBA community here, Alexis, that they've had to really reckon with like a finite amount of time in the day and not being able to fit everything in.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I really thought that coming to school, I was like, I've done this. Like, I'm an adult. I pay bills. I go to work. I go out on the weekends. I love a good brunch. Like, I got this. I did not have this. I don't think anybody had it, to Minnie's point. So I was kind of in a little bit of a different situation, sort of. So I did do early recruiting at OP per Angel's mention, and similar to Minnie, had multiple interviews, a few job offers. And then I ended up having a job offer before school actually started. And so for me, that was like, and this is obviously very specific to the consortium community that's listening to this podcast. But for me, that was something that was extremely important for me to prioritize because I know myself. And with those three options of like school, social, and then recruiting, I was going to feel like I was underwater very quickly. And so to the best that I could navigate, I tried to sparse out what I could. And that was the recruiting piece really early on. But per what I said earlier in the episode, you'd think that freed up time. It did not. Instead, I found other ways to fill my time. And so I spent a lot of time helping other people go through the recruiting process or do things with admissions or whatever the case may be, and then kind of starting to do different D&I efforts because that was super important to me. And I knew that if I was going to kind of free up this space of my time, I wanted to fill it intentionally. And then, but to Minnie's point and to your point, Brett, there's never really been a space in anyone's life, maybe college, undergrad is the closest you've been to having to kind of navigate this kind of time management. But even in college, for all intents and purposes, you didn't have much going on outside of your school bubble and very little to worry about. I mean, and that's very overgeneralization. Obviously it's unique for some circumstances. But this is like, you have class at 8 a.m., you get out at 1:10 p.m. That is just true for your first 3 quarters. There might be a day that you get out a little bit earlier, and some random days where you'll do like, simulations or things, but go with 8 a.m. to 1 p.m. And that seems like we've been working 9 to 5, like 8 to 1 is fine. It's not. Like, it's great. I love it. And looking back at it, I'm glad we made it through it, but it is an adjustment truly, and then we have like these time treasured traditions of like a cold call on a Thursday where the whole community gets together and like hangs out on the lawn and eats and drinks and just has community. And then we have, TNDC in the evening. And then that's Thursday. And then we go all the way to Sunday and then start all over again. And then by then there's like, so many things that you want to take advantage of. And I think to Minnie's point, like, you're not supposed to do it all. And I think that's the beauty of it. And I think it is really one of those like scary design tactics that someone in the powers that be really thought this through and are doing it well. And that you have to pick the things that matter to you the most and really pick. And it's okay if you get it wrong the first couple of times. If you think like, I really want to do this social thing and you feel like you're missing out on other activities, like there are 25 more of them coming, and it's okay to pick and choose, when you do. And that's like also a shameless plug for like second year coaches and second years, really leveraging them and us, I guess, as liaisons, because we've done it for all intents and purposes. And then we can help you understand, like, is this the thing that you want to be missing? Is this the thing you don't want to be missing? It's just nice to have people that you don't have to reinvent the wheel for. So
I think that last point is such a good one, because one of the things that I've learned about in doing these conversations is the extent to which second years play a really important role in helping first years navigate the first year experience. So you mentioned second year coaches. I just interviewed the second year tutor chairs who lead that program. There's all the connection that happens within the clubs and organizations, particularly those that are career oriented. But just beyond that, all even the affinity clubs, there's a lot of support that comes. And of course, then you have communities like the Consortium. To your point, you do not have to invent the wheel here. There are other people who've gone before you. Pick their brains, see what suggestions they might have for you. And I do think that there's a fair amount of trial and error early on. Like, you're not going to get it all right from the very beginning. Great if you do, but don't expect that you will. So. I
don't know anybody that got it right the first time, like anybody. And I've asked because I was like, maybe I just am bad at this. No, I don't know anybody that got it right the first time. And my transition, I think, was just for me, it was unique coming from Chicago to Charlottesville, because it was like such a shock that it was so small, I think, was my biggest shock. I've never lived in a suburb in my life. And so that was for me the biggest piece of transition. But once you build your community here, like that's so inconsequential. It doesn't really make a difference anymore. Q1 Alexis would be shocked that I am saying this right now, but here growth is what's happened here. So it is really nice to have like this community of people around. And to your point, Sakari mentioned it, I'm sure, on her episode, like, we are her and I are very close and like in a close knit friend group. And it's just it's a very nice thing once you have it. And once you kind of mastered it, and it might take you 4 quarters, which it kind of did. But once you get it, like, it's there for life, and it's a really good feeling.
And I think some of that connection is more possible in a place like Charlottesville, where the school is not just the focus of your academic life, it's also your social life, and all of these things are layered and integrated together. In bigger cities, I think people tend to scatter a little bit more, so your connections are a little bit more fleeting. The relationships may be a little bit more to the surface, not quite as deep, because, well, you don't have to. I mean, you have a lot of other things going on in your life, a lot of other things competing for your time. So let's talk about the Consortium. The reason for our conversation here, y'all are all new Consortium Liaisons. Congratulations on your role. Some of our listeners may not necessarily know too much about the Consortium, or maybe learning a little bit more about it as we go here, maybe Googling while we're talking. Alexis, would you mind telling us a little bit more about what the Consortium is?
Yeah. So the Consortium is basically, it's founded as like the nation's largest diversity network. And so really it was founded with the ideals of getting Black and Brown students into higher education, specifically into business school. So it's grown so much over time. So it started with a small group of, correct me if I'm wrong on this, like 13 initial schools or around that number. And we've grown substantially. We've now collected a couple new premier schools, which is a huge part to have a part of our network. And so the consortium not only is a network of diverse talent that's going to go into these higher education programs and into business schools and later into management. But it's a system that basically sets it up so that we have the opportunity to apply to multiple schools and have access to funding to get in through the programs. So it just creates equity across the system when it comes to business school for diverse talent across the board. It is important to note it's not exclusive to just Black, Brown, and Indigenous talent. That is something that has changed since its foundation. So allies and white people are welcome to join the consortium as long as they are, and it's part of your application process, as long as you are following the mission and you are about the mission and wanting to make sure that we create the advancement for diverse talent to go through the pipeline.
Well, thank you for getting us started on this part of the conversation, Alexis. Minnie, you had mentioned earlier that DE&I is one of your real passion areas. I'm wondering, is that the inspiration for you to serve as a consortium liaison? What led you to, say this is something that's a priority for me as I move into my second year?
Yes. So consortium has just given me so much, honestly, because I think the friends that I've made and that real sense of belonging that I've really lacked. So I'm originally from India and I moved to the US about 12 years ago. So I'm stuck in that weird space of being kind of American, kind of Indian. And I've always struggled with my identity. And I just felt like with consortium, I could be myself. And I felt like people accepted me for who I was. And that meant everything. And I just want to be able to pay it forward and help build a community that brings people together, where people feel like they can be themselves and, they can find their place. And that's part of the reason why I want to be a consortium liaison for the first year students.
That's such a powerful testimonial when you think about, someone's reasons for joining an organization, for wanting to serve in this way. Angel, how about you? What led you to say, I'd like to be a consortium liaison?
So for me, it's been the few moments where I've had a chance to now as a first year, being sort of on the other side of things in terms of the application process and having exposure to applicants and then getting to hear their story. I spent a weekend in Philly in Q2, and on the drive back, my buddy and I, we were talking to a prospective applicant and just, getting in his head, hearing his story, strategizing, giving him advice on like what schools to apply to, how to go about the process, who he needed to talk to at Darden, any way that we could help. And so I've had a couple of similar conversations in the time since. And I think that is where, like, all through, Q1 and Q2, in terms of like my involvement with different clubs and associations on grounds, consortium is where I've felt more drawn to in terms of like the interactions that I've had with people and like what I feel like I've been able to put into it as well as get out of it in terms of like that reward and that fulfillment, that instant gratification of like, I'm helping this person or like I'm somehow passing along this knowledge and it might be of use to someone. That's what really drew me to the liaison role.
So you mentioned that Darden was a dream school for you. What's it like? All right, so you start answering prospective student calls. You're no longer the prospective student. You're now the first year student at Darden. What's it like to be on the other side of that conversation?
Feels really good. Yeah, it feels great. I definitely, so Darden was my dream school. And so I do like to advocate for Darden 100%, but then take it back to, right, the three of us are consortium liaisons. And so when I'm talking to people on the phone, I really am interested in like what's best for them. So, we'll strategize and we'll talk about different programs and where their best fit might be. I really like to try to get to know them in the little time that we have and try to sort of give them my honest opinion. But I still, at the end of the day, in my opinion, I think Darden is a hidden gem. I think that We have some incredible people here. There's some incredible faculty, and some incredible professors. And I'm Darden all day.
All right. Well, thank you, Angel. And Alexis, coming to you, same question. Why did you decide that Consortium Liaison, that was what you wanted to do as you move into your second year?
Yeah, there's so many reasons. I think Angel I can confirm he is truly Darden through and through all the way. And I think when it comes to consortium, just like really basing it off of the mission, just enhancing diversity and inclusion on a global scale, education wise and in leadership. To me, that's something that I've done in every role that I've been in some form or fashion. It's just grown as I've progressed through my career. And obviously having gone to an HBCU, I feel like it's ingrained in the fabric of who I am. It's something D&I is just, I secretly hope that one day it doesn't exist because we won't need the, effort. It will just be an equitable space. But for me, specifically with the Consortium Liaison, I think it really boils down to the people that I was working with and the support that I received along the way throughout my Darden journey, whether it was pre-Darden or now that I'm matriculated into Darden. And I just know how pivotal and and how beneficial they were to me and what I would love to give back to someone else. I very much so, one of my personal missions in life and just beliefs is that I strive to occupy spaces that weren't necessarily designed for me so that I can keep the door open to bring people behind me that don't necessarily look like me and maybe a little bit even more different to just really continue to diversify the space. And so certain faculty and staff and students, very huge shout out to and plug to Christy Julian. She's been my lifeline at this school since I've been here. And she is a huge part of Consortium as well as Christian West, both of the Christians. And they've just been such a support system. And then all of our second years that were part of our journey. So Sarah, Rafa, Chisum, and then all the second years that mentored us through the process. I can truly say, and I hate to give them too much credit, I don't want to get their heads too big, but I can truly say that I'm only as successful at Darden as I am right now and was able to get the opportunities and the dream job that I was looking for before even starting because of their guidance and because of their help and their, maturity throughout the whole process. And I can only hope to do the same for students behind me. And similar to Angel, I talked to a lot of prospective students and I've been just so excited about, their fresh set of eyes and their excitement coming into the program. And I just want to continue to cultivate that and really show them that we are so much fun here. We have a great time. This is a community that we want to continue to grow and want to encourage the difference and the change makers to come here. And there's so much space and opportunity and time to do great things at Darden. And I think we have the ability to just take it to the moon. And I hope to do that.
You got to get Christy Julian back on the podcast. We interviewed her right when she got to Darden and need to come back around. She's got a lot of good things going on. Always one of the most interesting, fun people to talk to. She is such a hilarious lady.
That's the one you might want to get visual. She'll have really crazy glasses that day, I'm sure.
A strong eyewear game is
Yeah.
how I would describe Christy Julian. And for those of you who are wondering who the two Christians are, that would be Christian West and Christian Robinson. They've both been here on the podcast and would recommend both of the interviews. We interviewed Christian Robinson not so long ago. Christian West, you're going to have to go back a little ways. When he first came to Darden, we had him on. And he works very closely with the consortium population and leads our diversity recruitment efforts. So busy year ahead, undoubtedly, for all of you. Probably will begin within the next month or so as you help the students get ready for OP out in Colorado. Excited to hear that that's going to be in person. Minnie, what are you looking forward to in the year ahead when you think about your role as a consortium liaison?
I think for me, the biggest thing is I want to be that person that people can feel comfortable with and rely on to come talk about whether it's academics or them feeling social anxiety, because FOMO is going to happen. And as someone who has struggled in, trying to find where I fit in and trying to find my friend group, if I really empathize with people when they're struggling with stuff like that. So if I can be a resource in any of those things and feel like I'm making a difference in someone's life, to me that I feel like I would have met my goal.
you're right that those are all things that people struggle with when they come to a new community, when they're navigating something like business school. You're trying to find your place, and you come from a world where you're probably pretty well known, whether it was your community at home, your office, whatever environment you were in before. And business school can feel like starting over in some ways. And so I appreciate that point. Angel, how about you? What are you looking forward to in the year ahead?
So I haven't actually floated this to anyone except for maybe Alexis and Minnie. But I spent a lot of time looking at employment reports when I was in the process of applying. I sort of lived by those, as well as I was really looking at the hard numbers and stats and things like that for across programs in terms of their admission statistics. And one of the things that I found interesting, was that you couldn't drill down and find diverse candidates. And I would really love to try to work on some sort of initiative where perhaps we could incorporate that into maybe not something as formal as an employment report, but some resource where prospective students could get diverse students could get a better idea of what the opportunities are like here at Darden for them as minority candidates. So,
all right. So maybe some career reporting, work in your future. That's interesting. And I think we have this conversation all the time within our admissions team. It does feel like prospective students are particularly focused on career outcomes, which makes sense, right? Given the investment that you're making, the fact that this is professional school, right? You're doing this in service of your career. It is school, right? You're hopefully excited about the learning, but at the end of the day, after roughly 2 years in Charlottesville, I think people want to know what kind of jobs, what will the job look like, the salary, what are my options here, what's possible. So I can understand why that would be on your mind. Alexis, how about for you? Consortium liaison, moving into the second year. What are you looking forward to?
Yeah, it's funny because as consortium liaisons, the three of us technically have pillars that we align to. So whether it's social, academic, or career. And so I feel like this podcast is really starting to flesh out that Angel should probably think about focusing on career. Minnie and I might swap between academics and social, or all three of us will do all three. But I think for me, I'm really looking forward to just truly creating a deeper, more intentional bond with everyone in consortium, and really cultivating that with the new class of students that comes in, and really making sure that we kind of usher them in a space that's just create space for them and allows them to understand and believe that they have the right to be here and to just thrive in every setting that they're in. I think we have a really unique opportunity because this is the first time it feels like 20 years. 2019 was 3 years ago, but the first time that there will be 2 consecutive classes that have both had the in-class experience. Ours obviously started off masked, but we haven't had any virtual experience. So I'm excited to be able to have had an in-person experience and kind of usher in the new class with their version of an in-person experience, and really being there for them in every facet of the word and however we can mentor them. And then just in terms of second year, I'm just so excited that I get to pick whatever classes I want to take. I'm just excited to do things that I think are super exciting and fun, which don't get me wrong, Shane and Elena, I loved your classes. I'm just saying I get to choose them this time. And I'm excited for a lot of the things that we have planned across the board just at Darden at large. So whether it's consortium, whether it's DSA related, BBSA, and all the other acronyms of all the clubs that you guys will learn. But I am very excited for the programming that is coming because I think we have a ton of ideas as a class of 2023. And we are freakishly excited for class of 24 to get here so we can kind of show you guys what's going on.
And for our listeners, if you're wondering who Shane and Elena are, they are Darden faculty members, perhaps who need no introduction, but just for those of you who are less familiar with the Darden faculty lineup, That's Shane DeColey, an accounting faculty member, much beloved accounting faculty member. He won basically the Grand Slam of faculty awards in one of his first years here, maybe even his first year. He won the full-time award. He won the executive award. He was a faculty marshal. And Elena Lutskina, also equally beloved, finance faculty member here at Darden, teaches in the core and also a number of electives. We asked the same last question of all of our guests here. Angel, I wonder if you could start us off, just a piece of advice. I feel like there's been a lot of advice here on this conversation, but what's better than some advice? More advice, I guess. So if you wouldn't mind, just a word of advice as folks who are listening to this, maybe gear up for starting their MBA program or think about starting their MBA program.
Yeah, so this is going to sound contrarian, given that we kind of talked about, that there's pillars and you can only do so much. But I would say definitely invest in building bonds, I would say, with your section to some, a lot of those section events, Darden Olympics, the cold calls, the TNDCs. I mean, that's where everything happens. And so, I definitely invested some time there early on to build relationships. And I think that it's definitely paid dividends.
I like that idea. Just say yes. You'll figure it out. And we always talk here on the podcast about the adjustments. Q1, Q2. You're learning a lot. There's a lot coming at you. You're learning how to be a business school student. You're navigating the core, as has been noted here. You're also navigating career, and by the way, being a member of the Darden community. But there's also a lot of excitement with all of that. You're making friends, you're getting engaged with things. Hopefully you're starting to feel a bit more settled here. And so I like the idea of saying yes. Alexis, how about you? Word of advice for our listeners?
Yeah, I would absolutely echo Angel. I would say challenge yourself to say yes to things that you normally wouldn't. So there's polo matches in the summer here and like early fall, which from City Girl, I was like, what in the heck is that? Like, I have no interest, but it's such an interesting experience. It's really fun that I would not have done had someone not been like, we should try it. It'll be fun. So I would say definitely try things that you wouldn't normally say yes to and take advantage of all of the opportunities to network. Sometimes network sounds really transactional and it feels inauthentic, and it can be that if that's what you make it. But if you take the opportunities for a first coffee, a second coffee, a walk around grounds, first coffee and second coffee are breaks that we have throughout the school year. Just every day you'll have a first coffee at 9:25 and the second coffee at 11 something, 11:25, I think. I just go when the class is over, but take the opportunity to talk with someone that you don't know, talk with professors that you haven't really chatted with. Something I did in my section was at the beginning of first coffee, I would look around the room and see 6 people I hadn't really made a connection with yet by Q2. And I just invited like 6 people on a calendar, checked everyone's schedule and said, hey, I'm inviting you guys to lunch. Like we haven't had time to spend together and you guys don't really hang out together. And so like, let's talk. And I've been able to build a lot of relationships that way. And it's just a nice, very low key way of doing things rather than a big setting. So if you thrive in smaller settings, there is space for you to do that here. And I would highly, highly encourage it. And it's also okay to say no. I know I just said a lot of say yes, but it's okay to say no and take time for yourself.
All right. I'm trying to keep up with the advice. Say yes. Say yes to things that you might not necessarily think about saying yes.
And then also say no.
But also be okay to say no.
I said at the top that we were going to get a little contrarian.
It's true. It's the same advice that we got. And you don't realize it until it's happening that you're like, yeah, no, it's because to Minnie's point, and I'm sure she'll talk about the FOMO again, and like you have it. But sometimes you realize that the FOMO is just, it's not as bad as when you just exhaust yourself trying to do every single thing. Right. So like say yes to a TNDC at least one time, right? Don't say no every single time. But if you go and you're like, it's not really my thing, then it's okay to say no again. But I would not shun anything until you've at least tried it.
Your point about lunch is a really interesting one, Alexis. We had Tyler Kelly and Mariah Horner here on the podcast not so long ago, and they were really passionate and excited about helping make connections amongst students who may not necessarily have connected during the first year, or first years and second years that may not naturally meet and encounter each other. That's where they were really spending a lot of time and thinking about what they might want to accomplish in the year ahead. So, I mean, it's a small community. It's 335 students per class. You've got your section there. That's a very natural place to get started. It's a cool idea, just inviting people to lunch if you haven't met them yet. I like that. All right, Minnie, you get the last word here. Word of advice for our listeners.
I think the biggest thing I would say to them is you deserve a place at these top institutions. You are worthy of being here because you have gotten in. And even if you're thinking about applying, you should do it, because I wasn't even going to apply to Darden because I didn't think I was good enough. But then I met Mark Paulo, who was the previous admissions person at a MAPS event, and he convinced me to apply to Darden, and here I am. And so that's my first piece of advice. Like, believe in yourself, be kind to yourself. It will happen, and you do deserve to be here. My second piece of advice is you are going to be very uncomfortable as you're going through the MBA process, because you are going to meet people who are very different from you, and you should embrace the discomfort. It is very easy to want to just be comfortable and be with the same group of people that you always hang out with, do the same things that you always want to do, because Darden does throw a lot at you, and you want the comfort because when else would you be comfortable? But embrace the discomfort, because it will pay off in the end.
All right, 2 pieces of advice. I like it. Strong finish, Minnie. And your point about, put yourself out there, take the chance, apply. The old 100% of shots not taken are absolutely missed. One of those kind of thoughts. I think we have so much respect from the admissions end for people who are willing to kind of take the time, put in an application, put in that work, tell their story. And there is a vulnerability to that, right? To say, hey, look, this is who I am. And I'd like to be a part of this community, and you don't know how it's going to work out. There's an uncertainty there. But we have so much respect for it. And obviously from an admissions committee standpoint, we love helping people navigate this journey. And there is so much support beyond the admissions team. You have all talked about conversations you've had with prospective students and how people helped you along your journey. And so I'd like just to reiterate that as you go through these things, whether you join us for a webinar or a workshop or schedule a call, a conversation, reach out to a current student, you're not alone as you navigate this. So thank you all for a great podcast conversation. Congratulations on your new roles as Consortium Liaisons. It's been so much fun catching up with you here.
It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
And that was my interview with 3 first-year students in our full-time MBA class of 2023 and the Consortium Liaisons newly named here at the Darden School of Business, Alexis Orr, Minnie Lahoti, and Angel Monrroy. As always, if you have any comments, suggestions, requests, anything you'd like for us to cover here on the podcast, we're all ears. We can be reached at Darden, that's DARDEN, at virginia.edu. Until next time, stay safe, be well, and thanks for listening.